Hello again. This is Pastor Don Phillips of Don and Carol Phillips Ministries, operating out of Kansas City. And we're so happy that you have caught this message because I feel definitely that I need to be spreading a message of encouragement today everywhere. And I'm going to read to you from Psalms 37:24, which says, "Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand." And I have made the title of this, "Hold to God's Unchanging Hands." Have you ever held anyone's hand or had anyone hold your hand? You know, there are many times and many ways that we've reached out to touch other people's hand or to be touched by them. When we think about hand holding, our first reaction, of course, it goes to the romantic. We think about teenage romance and the real magic of holding hands with our love. Well, there are other times too, like the times we held the strong and confident hand of our father or mother in the time of crises, or joined hands in prayer with them or with other people. Even the times when we held the hand of a newborn child at birth was an important and powerful moment for each of us. There's a special magic about holding hands and being held by a strong hand. Now, we hold hands for different reasons, each of which has its own meaning. For instance, consider the picture of an elderly couple sitting on a porch, holding hands in the moonlight. We call that commitment. Then consider the nurse who takes the face of a small boy who sees his mother rolled into an emergency room and holds his face up close to hers to keep him from seeing her pain. That's, we'll call, sensitivity. A construction worker building a mighty building, holding a hammer, that's strength. The time a preacher stands behind a young woman with tears in her eyes. It's one of those times that we don't like to run into, but just finally, at this point in time, this young lady her divorce decree has become final. And it's tough. It's a tough time. Yes, it's tough. So the pastor pats her hand gently. The marriage has been painful, but change too is painful. And so we call that sympathy. The mom who takes her son to school for his first day of school, and as he approached the classroom, that boy, not knowing what's coming next, reaches up and takes a hold of mom's hand. That's security. The husband stands at his wife's bedside. She's been faithful, but now she's seriously ill. They've faced a lot of stuff together over the years, but never anything like this. And he holds her hand and squeezes it gently. And his hand says to her, "We've faced much together. We're going to face this too." This is love. Camp instructor takes the hand of each child as they cross a stream. That's help and strength. A wedding father takes the hand of his daughter and places it in the hand of a young man and thus gives her away. That's confidence, and it takes confidence to do that. There's a fancy word that is used by the theologians to describe a condition that is applicable to the circumstance we're talking about. It is called theoanthropomorphism. It means taking the traits of humans and giving them to God. That's what we do when we think of holding hands with God in the picture that we're talking about today. Instead of a father or mother or caring friend, the hand becomes the hand of God. It's the idea that we as believers can put our entire lives in God's hand and God's care, and it would be the same as holding his hand, or perhaps God holding our hand. Theologians tell us that there are probably 100 theoanthropomorphic references in the Bible that refer to God's hands and our hands. We read about them. We even sing about them, putting ourselves in the hands of God. Many years ago, a popular song put it this way: "Time is filled with swift transition. Naught of earth unmoved can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Trust in him who will not leave you, whatsoever years may bring." If by earthly friends forsaken, still more closely to him cling. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. You know, as believers, we come to trust ourselves in the hands of God. He will correct us. He'll conform us. He'll protect us and strengthen us in our times of need. Now, the text I read from Psalm 37 focuses on David as he explains the nature of the relationship between the believer and God. And he says, though he fall, talking about the man, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. The overall intent of this psalm is to highlight the security of believers with their hands in the hands of God. Believers are reminded not to be envious of the unrighteous, nor to be doubtful of their own security with God because of the apparent success of the unrighteous. Believers are secure with God. The foundation of their position is much more sure than the fragile nature of the unrighteous, who will soon be cut down like grass. The righteous, claims David, will never be abandoned. In the course of his entire life, David claims he'd never seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging for bread. The righteous are being held by and are holding on to the hands of God. There's no stronger foundation than that. And because of the fact the righteous are in the hands of God, they will never be utterly destroyed and kept down. Either they climb up with their own faith as leverage, or he picks them up with the power of his will. You see, there are measurable or immeasurable blessings, I should say, that come to us as we hold to God's hand. Because, first of all, let me say his hand is unchanging. In a difficult world where things change constantly and sometimes instantly, it's a blessing for believers to know that God's hand is unchanging. Just because they change something in Washington, D.C., or overseas in some other country, doesn't matter at all, because God's hand is unchanging. The way of dealing with us is, or his way of dealing with us is constant, and it's predictable. He won't be with us today and forsake us tomorrow. The biblical record is filled with reassurances that God will be with us in a predictable manner, because he is a predictable God. When Israel prepared to go into unknown territory, Moses reminded them in Deuteronomy 31:6, "Be strong and of a good courage," he said. "Fear not, nor be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God, he it is that goes with you. He will not fail, and he will not forsake you." In the New Testament, this is repeated again for Christians in Hebrews 13:5. "For he hath said," the Lord said, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." See, this is a reassurance that whatever situation that may arise, God will be there. Even when our parents and relatives seem to change in their relationships toward us, God is unchanging. Psalms 27:10 says, "When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up." In God's hands we are safe. He will not walk out on us. He will not abandon us. He will be there for us regardless of the circumstance that we're going through. And let me tell you something else. God is compassionate toward us. He's sensitive to our needs. He understands the burdens we bear and how we feel on the inside. There are times when those around us just do not know or understand our circumstance, but you know what? You've never seen the time when God didn't know and understand just what you're going through. The skeptics around us may doubt our motives, but God knows. Because he knows, he helps us carry our load, and our faith in him somehow makes our burdens lighter. Matthew 11:28, we find Jesus saying, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." That's compassion, friend. He promises that if we will take his yoke upon us, our burden will be light. That's a sign that he knows us and knows all about us. Songwriter said, when your body suffers pain and your health you can't regain, and you have to get along with meager fare, Jesus knows the pain you feel. He can save and he can heal. Take your burdens to the Lord and leave them there. See, while we are in his hands, we're under protection of a compassionate God who loves, who knows, and who understands us. Out of his compassion and love for us, he opens doors for us and makes ways when there is no way, that we may enjoy life more abundantly, because God cares for us. That's what compassion means. We hold to his hand because he cares about us. He cares about you personally. Personally. Think of that. God, the God of heaven. God's hand is strong enough to hold us up at all times. He's powerful. And because he's powerful, we have to hold his hand, or when we hold his hand, we have his stability in our own lives. The sense of security we derive from holding onto a powerful hand comes from the fact that God is a pillar of strength. How strong is God? Well, Isaiah tried to describe it in chapter 40, verse 15 of his writing. He painted a picture of God being so big and so powerful that all of the nations of the world form but a single drop in the bucket in comparison to his strength. And then he asked, can we compare God to anything? Can we compare anything to God who sits on a throne, hovering over men who appear like grasshoppers before him? There is no strength greater than the strength of our God. The poet said this, he batted his eyes and lightning flashed. He clapped his hands and the thunder rolled. He waved his hands and the waters came down. His footsteps hollowed the valleys out and bulged the mountains up. What does all this say? It says whatever problem I have, whether it's sickness or finance, love or social reform, God is big enough and strong enough to handle it. That's what Jeremiah, when he said, Lord God, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and your outstretched arm. There is nothing too hard for you. Can I tell you today that there's nothing too hard for God? He can handle any situation that we put before him sincerely. In answer to that same statement, Isaiah 59:1 says, behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened, nor that it cannot save, nor his ear heavy, that it cannot hear. So every believer should hold to God's hand. Even in difficult times, we hold on to his hand and wait for him and his deliverance. So don't give up. He can and he will take care of it. Just hold to God's unchanging hand. Now, I want to tell you that God's hand protects us. He uses his power to secure the faithful among us. Security is a concern of every person and every nation. There's a security at airports, train stations, schools, and even security systems in our own homes. Yet, while we rely and appreciate these systems for a measure of security, the believer trusts in God for his ultimate protection. Another reason we hold to God's hand is because he protects us. And Isaiah 41:10-13 puts it this way, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I'll strengthen you. Yes, I'll help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Behold, all those who were incensed against you shall be ashamed and disgraced. They shall be as nothing, and those who strive with you shall perish. You shall seek them and not find them. Those who contended with you, those who war against you, shall be as nothing, as a non-existent thing. For I, the Lord your God, will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you. Mister, that is security. I can't think of any stronger security. It's security in the hand of God. Those who attempt to harm the anointed children of God take on the power of God, who has promised to provide security for us. It's a simple truth. You mess with God, and God's going to get you. That's kind of colloquial language, but we've heard it before. In times of difficulty, believers have refuge in the strength of God. That's what Psalm 46:1 means when it says, God is our strength and our refuge, a very present help in time of trouble. In a time of trouble, let me urge you, you may turn loose of a lot of other things, but don't turn loose of the hand of God. Now, it's one thing to talk about holding God's hand, but some people may say, well, I don't know what you mean by that. I've never seen God's hand. I've never touched his hand. There are many of us who fail to hold God's unchanging hand, perhaps because we don't know how. Well, to hold God's hand successfully, we must not try to hold onto his hand as much as we ask him to hold onto ours. That's the important thing. Because when God holds our hand, he guides us. Each of us remember a favorite teacher who had the task of teaching us how to form cursive letters. I don't know if they do that in schools anymore, but when I was in school, they did. There was always some point in our learning where the teacher had to literally take our hand in her hand and guide our fingers as we shaped the letters. When we allow God to guide us, we allow him to take control of our lives and to guide us along the way. That's what the songwriter had in mind when he said, lead me, guide me along the way. Lord, if you lead me, I will not stray. When we're about to move through life without dotting an I, he guides us. When we're about to move on without crossing a T, he guides us. That's why the songwriter concluded, Lord, let me walk each day with thee. Lead me, O Lord, lead me. When God holds our hands, he holds us, because we might be tempted to let go. When life gets difficult and tiresome, our hands sometimes sweat and they tire and may start to slip in our faith, our church attendance, our giving, or our general spirituality. But when God holds our hands, even if we slip a little bit, he still holds on, friend. No wonder the old warriors sang, Lord, hold my hand while I run this race. I don't want to run this race alone. Hold my hand, Lord, while I try to take care of my family. I don't want to run this race alone. Hold my hand, Lord, while I try to deal with the raging storms in my life. I don't want to run this race alone. Hold my hand, Lord, while I try to make sense of the madness that surrounds me. I don't want to run this race alone. We should let God hold our hand, because we can be sure if he holds our hand, he won't let go. In many of the action movies that children like to watch today, often the superhero leaning over the edge of a cliff or mountains and reaching out for a person in distress. Sometimes we hear them say, give me your hand, I won't let you go. And then they watch as that almost superhuman strength pulls that lost person up and brings them to safety. I don't know about you, friends, but I find myself sometimes slipping down the mountain of life, and I have to cry out, take my hand, hold me in your everlasting arms. Take my hand, Lord, when I can't see my way. I pray, Lord, take my hand when I can't turn to the left or the right. I don't know what to do. I'm confused. Take my hand when I'm weak, Lord, and give me strength. Lord, take my hand when I've fallen and need help to get up again. When you find yourself falling and you can't get up, call on the name of Jesus. Jesus is a strong hand and he will not let you down. Jesus is like a mother to the motherless. Jesus is a present help in time of trouble. So I'm urging you today, hold to his unchanging hand. Whatever's going on in your life, whatever's going on in your neighborhood or in your state or in our country, just remember, hold to his hand. He will not let you go. God bless you. Hope you found this message a blessing. If you're not attending a church today, find one in your area and become a part of it. I ask you in the name of Jesus.